Hey, what's going on, guys? My name is Dr. Boyce Watkins, and I'm from the Black Financial Channel on drboycetv.com. Go ahead and come in and get comfortable because we're going to have a quick little conversation about what it means to be rich versus wealthy. And the reason I came up with this idea to have this quick conversation is because I thought about this show that I used to watch called The Jeffersons. The Jeffersons was a show that was very popular for a really long time when I was a little kid. And some of you may remember the show, some of you may have seen the reruns. But I think that there's a real interesting dynamic here that, how you look back 20 years later and you realize that there were some things going on that you didn't pick up because you were only, 8 years old. Well, I thought that I would bring up George Jefferson versus Mr. Whittendale. And we're going to break that down. And it's going to help us understand rich versus wealthy. So go ahead, buckle your seatbelts, get comfortable, hit the thumbs up button, share, subscribe button, put your hashtag B1 in the chat. And we're going to get started right now.
Here we are, clan the isms, cataclysm great. Our people out here struggling, trying to make it in this state. Everybody out here doing it, but we the ones too late.
All right, guys. I hope you guys can hear me okay and see me okay. I tried to hit the little intro button, but it didn't work. So that's technology for you. But I'm actually out at sea, so I don't have good Wi-Fi. But I Little Rock, the city. I see you in there. Max Jerome, what's going on, brother? Game RIP. Desmond Rigger Smith, good to see you. Different Strokes reference nostalgia. Says 77777 One Eternal Son Allah. Wow, that's a great name. I like that. All right. So anyway, guys, let me tell you what was on my brain. You guys know weird stuff pops into my head, and I see the whole world as a big university. I see the whole universe as a place where we can learn all the things we learned in school. You can learn in life. Life is the ultimate college campus, and you can learn a whole lot more by thinking about the things you see around you than you can by just reading a book. So I was thinking about the show The Jeffersons, and The Jeffersons. How many of you, give me a yes or no, if you ever watched The Jeffersons at any point? If you used to watch the show, if you've seen an episode, give me a yes or no if you remember The Jeffersons, if you remember Mr. Whittendale, if you know the storyline of The Jeffersons. I assume most of you know it. But I just want to make sure I do a good check just to see if everybody's on the same page. So give me a yes or no. Did you used to watch The Jeffersons when you were young? All right. So here's the deal. All right. So I see a lot of yeses. Okay. Thank you, Leon and Crelly. I appreciate that. And Sharon and Sherry. Okay. So here's why I thought about George Jefferson and Mr. Whittendale. Well, if you remember the storyline, George Jefferson, the whole theme of George Jefferson was moving on up. Well, we're moving on up to the sky, to the deluxe apartment in the sky. Oh, moving on up, or something like that. I don't remember. Something about the east side, the apartment in the east side. I don't remember the words. I used to say 2D child because I was 8 and I didn't know what the words were, but I liked the show, right? So the whole storyline was George Jefferson and Wheezy, his beautiful black wife, that he loved very much, were moving on up. They started off poor and they were moving on up to an apartment, a deluxe apartment in the sky on the east side. And why were they doing that? Well, because George had opened up some dry cleaners and Jefferson's cleaners had taken off and George was doing well. George was making money and he got to live in a nice fancy building with lots of rich white people. Well, what's interesting about that show is I have some perspective on this. The first thing I want to mention is this. When he moved into the building, George Jefferson was a bad dude. Like George Jefferson reminded me of my daddy. Don't take nothing from nobody. He loved to tell white people off to their face. He had no fear of anything or anyone. And the only person I saw him ever afraid of, if I remember it right, the only person I ever saw him, kind of buckle in front of was this white guy named Mr. Whittendale. Right? Anybody remember that? This old dude that used to come by, and apparently this Mr. Whittendale was like all powerful. And I remember I paid attention because I was like, "Ooh, wow, he got George Jefferson scared." Right? That's kind of surprising, right? And so the reason George was intimidated by Mr. Whittendale is because George had worked really hard to get his apartment, right? He'd really, really, done whatever he needed to do to get a chance to rent an apartment in this fancy building. And Mr. Whittendale and his family owned the building. I believe his wife owned the building, but it was a family business, right? So he owned the building and George was a renter in the building. And George had worked very, very hard in order to get a chance to go rent in this building. Now, here's the thing. so George Jefferson was a smart guy. He was hardworking. He ran his own business. He was really a great model of success. And I think a lot of us are little George Jeffersons. You know, we started from the bottom. Now we're here, or at least you're on your way there. If you're not there yet, you're going to get there. Just keep doing what you're doing. I promise you, these things that we're talking about are going to work for you because you're already thinking differently. Just the fact that you're sitting here listening to me right now means you think different. I'm not here for everybody. I'm here for the people that want to do better. And also, a lot of us started off, in the struggle. I don't know if anybody else in the room knows what it's like to be poor. Anybody else remembers eating a bologna sandwich with no bologna, or boiling hot water and putting anything in that water just to make it into something you can eat, or maybe having your cereal where you didn't have any milk and you had to put water in your cereal or whatever it is, right? Like a lot of us started in those places, and now we're doing better, right? We've made different choices. We're smarter than our parents, and we've gone to the next level. So a lot of us are like little George Jeffersons. We don't take no stuff from white people. We also work our butts off to run our businesses, and we want to leave a legacy to our children. But what I realized is I said, it's really interesting to me that when you talk about level one versus level two, George Jefferson might have been level one. Maybe we started level zero. George Jefferson's level one. I kind of felt like Mr. Whittendale was level two. Now, this is not no white supremacy stuff, right? He was not level two because he was white, because George Jefferson didn't take stuff from white people. He would tell them off in a minute. Mr. Whittendale to me was kind of a level two, because I said, why is George Jefferson so scared of this man? Well, he was scared of this man because he was the renter and Mr. Whittendale owned the building. Now, George wasn't a bad investor. George owned his own business, so he was making big money from that. He had a stockbroker, so he invested in the stock market. So he was taking care of two out of the three pillars of wealth. The three pillars of wealth are stock market investing, entrepreneurship, and owning stock market investing, entrepreneurship, and owning real estate. So the only area where George did not, at least on the surface, appear to be participating in one of the pillars of wealth is through real estate. He took this tremendous pride in being able to rent an apartment building that was owned by Mr. Whittendale. So that's the one area where I'd have to critique a George Jefferson kind of setup. And there's another actual critique I'm going to lay out in a minute. But the one critique I would have is that it almost takes us back to the civil rights movement. When you talk about the civil rights movement, it was a time where black people took pride in giving their money to white people, right? Well, we could get into the fancy restaurants, or we could live in the fancy buildings and pay rent, or we could go to the fancy schools and give away all of our family wealth so we could pay tuition to learn from some white people that don't even want us there anymore, right? This thing that says, now, thank God I'm good enough to give you all my money, right? That's a type of white supremacy, and that's an economic loser. That's something that's going to push you backward, right? So, with George Jefferson, the one critique I would have with George is that I don't think that George Jefferson should ever have to bow to a Mr. Whittendale, right? He worked much harder than him. He'd actually come a lot further than him. He was a lot bolder than him. And Mr. Whittendale got all of his inheritance from his wife, from what I understand. His wife owned the building, right? So here's the deal. Now it looks like Calvin Smith. What are you doing, Calvin Smith? Are you in there causing trouble, man? Don't make me have to block you, bro. Because I'm happy you love Dr. Claude Anderson, but if you in here trying to be a hater, man, we got to put you up out of here. You'll never hear Dr. Anderson again, because he'll be on my channel in a couple of weeks. So don't be in there tripping, man. Just chill out. Go do something else. I'm sure there's some white people you can hang out with, or whatever it is you want to do in your spare time. All right. So anyway, so here's the deal. When you're talking about what it means to aspire to something, I would encourage you to realize that George Jefferson was an impressive man, but there's another level to go to, and that next level, economically speaking, might be that Mr. Whittendale level, right? Because if you see a man that you think is a great man and he's bowing to another man, then you have to say, well, what does this other man have that the first man doesn't have that's making him bow to him? And not to say that George bowed to anybody, but there was certainly a hierarchy established in that building. Mr. Whittendale and his family had a certain type of power because they owned the building. And also George was constrained by his mindset because he felt that having the right and the ability to give rent money to Mr. Whittendale was kind of an honor. Like it's an honor for me to give you, $3,000 a month and get nothing in return other than the right to live in a building where I'm actually paying the mortgage on this building that you're going to own. When Mr. Whittendale dies, his children will own that building, and the Jefferson's children get nothing from the rent money. They get the business now, they get the stocks, but they don't get anything from the real estate. Right? Do you follow what I'm saying? Give me a yes or no in the chat if you get what I'm saying. Also, hit the thumbs up button, share, and subscribe button. And yep, and I agree with you, John Alexander. He says George was a badass dude. In one episode, I remember he did get Mr. Whittendale told. Yep, he sure did. Okay, all right. Well, maybe he did tell him off one day. I like I said, nothing would surprise me because I think George Jefferson's a bad dude. I love it. He reminds me of my daddy, by the way. My daddy's kind of like that. Just don't take no stuff from nobody. And by the way, if you want to take a look at our Black Wealth calendars, we do have our Black Wealth calendars ready for 2021. The Black Wealth calendar is something you can put on your refrigerator that actually has Black Wealth principles for every month of the year. So it's something that I put together based on what I call the All Black Agenda. The All Black Agenda is basically an agenda designed by us for us that you can apply to your own family that doesn't need the permission of any politician or any fake Negro leader or anybody else. You can actually implement that agenda on your own. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, feel free to take a look at the Black Wealth Calendar. The URL is right there on the screen, blackwealthcalendar.com. All right, so hit the thumbs up button, hit the notification bell, hit the subscribe button. So let me finish up here. Here's another little interesting thing about Mr. Whittendale. When I mentioned Mr. Whittendale on my Instagram, there was a brother who went off on me, and he said, Mr. Whittendale, he didn't own the building. His wife owned the building. And the only reason that he had the building was because her family had left him the building. Her family left her an inheritance, and that's why she had the building. She didn't work for that. They didn't work for that. Right? And of course, because that's what it is, right? On social media, you say something and you try to say something that's helpful, and a hater always climbs out of the cracks of the closet, in his mama's basement and decides he wants to just try to ruin somebody's day. And but you know what? Here's the thing. I was really happy to hear that comment because I think that gives us an opportunity to address another issue. Here's the issue. You listening? Tell me if you're listening. I'm going to break down the issue here. You were trained to be a slave. Many of us, me included, I'm talking about all of us, were trained to be slaves. But what does that mean when I say you were trained to be a slave? Well, did anybody ever grow up hearing somebody tell you what you should do when you're black, you got to do twice as much to get half as much? Has anybody ever heard something like that? Or to get the same as the white people, you got to work twice as hard to get half as much. And you expect that. Did anybody else grow up like that, hearing stuff like that? Right? Like we really take pride in this kind of slave labor kind of thing where we're supposed to bust our ass to get the things that other people get for free. Right? We're supposed to just work ourselves into an early grave so we can get just one half of what everybody else has got, maybe 1/3 of it. Right? Black men die earlier than anybody else in America. We have the shortest lifespan in this country. And and a lot of it's because you're trained to work like a damn slave to get half of what everybody else has got. Now, here's the thing. There's a lot of virtue in hard work. A man that works hard is to me, that's a quality man. Ladies, never marry a man who don't want to work, who can't get his hands dirty and get out here and go hustle for the family, right? In fact, a lot of y'all women ain't even attracted to men like that, and I think that makes sense. And also, there are a lot of hardworking black women. Lord knows black women, they come through for everybody, and they come through for me. They come through for many of y'all, and their ability to be strong and tough and work hard should be commended. And so there's virtue in hard work. But here's the problem, though. Here's the problem. When you accept this idea that you only supposed to have something because you don't work yourself into the ground, ain't got no time for your kids, ain't got no time to enjoy your life, can't find any bliss in this life. You got to wait to get your by and by when you go to heaven, right? You got to wait till heaven to take a day off. Like your next vacation is going to be when you get to the pearly gates. That's not a good life, and that's not a fair life for you. That means that you're kind of okay with the idea that other people can get twice as much for doing half as much. And so when I look at Mr. Whittendale and I hear, I heard the brother say, well, George Jefferson worked hard and he ran his dry cleaners, and Mr. Whittendale, he didn't even own the building. He got the building from his wife. Well, yeah, that's because one of the key principles of wealth is that marriage and family are one of the most critical indicators of how much wealth you can obtain. A large part of the reason that black families can't build wealth is because black families don't stick together. Black families fall apart. So when when you got baby mama itis everywhere, baby daddy itis everywhere. When you are a dude with seven babies mamas and six kids or eight kids all over the country, you can't. It's hard for you to build wealth because your resources are spread out everywhere. If you are a woman who's got four babies daddies and only two of them or one of them are paying child support, then you're going to have a really hard struggle, right? So I'm not making fun of that. I'm just saying that in a lot of cultures that actually build wealth, they actually understand that you keep that family together. You take your time, you pick the right person, and then you work it out, you figure it out, you work through it. When I asked my daddy's been married to my mama 46 years, and I said, Daddy, what's the secret to staying married for 46 years? How did you do it? I mean, most people can't even stay married for 45 minutes. How'd you stay married for 46 years? I thought he was gonna say some more deep, profound stuff, right? He didn't say anything deep. He said the way you stay married 46 years is you keep coming home every day and you don't get divorced. And that sounds simplistic, but what he's really saying is that a commitment is a commitment is a commitment. See, people don't believe in commitment. People don't know what commitment is. People think commitment means I'm going to do this until I get uncomfortable, or I'm going to do this until I meet a girl with a bigger booty, or I'm going to do this until you start getting on my nerves, or I'm going to do this until I have a bad 3 months. You know, people don't know what commitment is. And the reason I encourage you to consider what commitment means to you is because marriage and family is one of the greatest processes for the transfer of wealth in all of existence. Can you dig it? Can you dig it? Just say I dig it if you get what I'm saying. Can you dig it? What I'm talking to you about right now. So when you diss Mr. Whittendale and say, well, only reason he got that wealth is because he got it from his wife. Yeah, a lot of wealthy people get wealth from their spouses, male and female, male and female. Tell your daughters, like, look, if they got the choice between two men equal in every category, and one's building wealth and the other one's throwing wealth away, pick the wealth builder. Pick the guy who's going to have something. Don't be picking the man that's going to sit around and throw all your family's money away. That guy's a sucker. Don't marry a sucker. That's one of the reasons people are here struggling, because you're marrying suckers. Anyway, let me keep going. Do me a favor, hit the thumbs up button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button. And there's a URL for our Black Wealth Bootcamp. If you're interested in this kind of thing, we have another Black Wealth Bootcamp cohort that starts January 7th. For 24 more hours, you can actually get 72% off. We've never done a 72% off discount ever. We haven't done a boot camp in 5 years, but it was very popular. We may not do another one for a while. So if you're interested in joining us for the January 7th cohort, feel free to go to blackwealthbootcamp.com. Hit the thumbs up button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button. So Mr. Whittendale got his money from his wife, and the brother who was mad, who basically got mad at me for saying that you want your children to be Mr. Whittendale. A lot of us are in the George Jefferson category, right? You're hustling, you're busting your butt, etc. Well, here's another thing about Mr. Whittendale that I want you to pay attention to. This is why I want your children to be a Whittendale. Not because I think Mr. Whittendale's better because he's white. Not because I want them to act like this dude. I don't know anything about this guy. I'm talking about in the position to have the freedom and the power that he had, right? Do you follow what I'm saying? Please listen. So the other thing that he mentioned when he was complaining about my analogy is he said, well, Mr. Whittendale, he didn't just get his money from his wife, but they got all their money from an inheritance. Somebody gave them that money, right? Well, did you guys know that wealth is supposed to be inherited? Did you guys know that you are supposed to leave your children assets? Did y'all know that? Or did you think that it was natural for you to die and have your kids begging the church to do a GoFundMe account just so they can bury your trifling ass because you didn't even get life insurance? Like really, for real. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was probably a little harsh when I said that. I didn't mean to be harsh because some people just don't know. But you didn't know, now you know. If you don't know, now you know that you're supposed to leave assets to your children. Your children are supposed to have a better life than you. There's no virtue in telling your child you need to start with nothing, just like I did. I mean, sure, don't get me wrong. Those of us who started with nothing, like my daddy, my daddy that raised me, when he dies, I'm sure he'll leave me something, right? Because he's a smart, responsible man. But my biological daddy died, lived, and ain't left me nothing, right? Didn't leave me anything, right? So a lot of us are used to that. A lot of us think that that's normal. That's not normal. You're supposed to have an inheritance that you can build off of, and the thing is that we get so stuck in this victim category that we turn ourselves sometimes into a pack of haters. Like, you hate rich people, you hate people that are doing better than you hate people who have it easier than you hate people because because their mama and their daddy stayed married and took care of them like a family. Maybe you're mad at people because their family gave them assets and your parents left you debts, right? And so rather than being a hater, I encourage you to get in a position where you become hated rather than being a hater. I'd rather be hated than be a hater, right? So you're always going to have haters. The more success you have, the more you do the right thing, the more you plan and prepare and succeed, and the more you take care of your children, the more haters you will have. Just be prepared. That's what's going to occur. Haters are attracted to success the way flies are attracted to, you know, you know, you know what I'm gonna say. I'm trying not to cuss. I'm practicing not cussing so much, but but here's the deal. When you talk about um, that whole idea, I mean, that guy's comment I thought was so poignant, where he complained. He said Mr. Whittendale didn't really own the building. His wife owned it, and she got it all through an inheritance. Well, that's the way it's supposed to be. Your children are supposed to inherit something. I had a friend who which she was black. She grew up, without much, like a lot of us did, and she was stunned because she had a coworker, a white coworker, a white boy, and every time they got their paycheck, this white boy would take his money and go to Vegas or whatever, like, and he would just waste his money, or he'd take his check and buy a new motorcycle, and she'd be like, "Don't you got bills to pay?" And he said, "Oh no, my bills are paid. My grandparents died and left me a building." His grandparents left him a building, which probably cost 1/10 of what it was worth by the time they left it to him, right? So here's the deal, Mr. Whittendale, this guy that George Jefferson, bowed to almost. I mean, was very intimidated by. He owned the building. George was paying the rent, so George was paying the mortgage, but Mr. Whittendale was getting the assets. That's why you don't, that's why renting should not be a permanent state of existence. Renting is supposed to be temporary before you become an owner. So George is hustling, running his businesses, paying Mr. Whittendale's mortgage. Mr. Whittendale has a wife who had an inheritance where he had enough money where he didn't have to go to work every day. So every morning, George gets up and goes to work. Mr. Whittendale gets up and eats breakfast and then maybe goes back and takes a nap because he doesn't have anywhere he has to go. So that person who is in a position where their money is working for them is the person who's won the game. You see, the goal is not to work for a white man for your entire life. I hope that we've understood this. I hope that in the many conversations you and I've had, give me a yes or no if you understand at least that part. That your goal in all of this wealth game is not to go work for a white man for your whole life. Your ancestors did that during slavery, and now you do the same thing. The difference is you get paid to do it, but they were unpaid, and they also were forced to work for the same person or whoever they were. They didn't have a choice of which plantation they wanted to work on. You get to choose your plantation. So the difference between you and your ancestors is they're forced to stay on the same plantation. You get to choose your plantation. They were unpaid, you were paid, right? But if you listen to most people and you say, "Hey, let's take today off. Let's go to the mall. Let's go hang out." They can't do it. What are they going to say? They're going to say, "Well, I got to go to work." You say, "Well, wait a minute. You don't have to go to work. Who said you have to go to work? There's no law saying you have to go to work." They would say, "Well, how else am I going to survive?" Right? Which pretty much means you have to go to work, which pretty much makes you a slave. When you get to the point where you have to do something and you have no choice, then you're a slave. I mean, there's no difference. Do you follow what I'm saying? That's what it is. So here's the point. So Lloyd, I am making my point, but if it takes too long for me to make my point, then I invite you to leave. Please leave if I take too long to get to the point, because I know I'm a long-winded motherfucker. But if I'm long-winded, then it's because I'm being long-winded because I have to make the point in a certain way. So if I'm too long-winded, then please, I invite you, my brother, please get the fuck out, because I'm not the guy for you. I really want to make sure I do this because I'd like to invite people to leave, because I'm not here to just give you the same old rinky-dink bullshit that you get from other places. I'm here to break some shit down for you so you'll understand what the hell's going on, so that you'll stop believing the nonsense that exists out here in this world. So here's the point. So basically, when you're talking about wealth and you're talking about working, this whole model that you've been trained with from birth, this whole model that you were given as a child, is a really messed up model. It's a really fucked up model. It's a model that says that your job in life is to go rent an apartment for life and pay somebody's rent. It is to buy products and buy a bunch of consumer items so you can make somebody else rich, make a producer rich because you're buying stuff all the time. Your job is to go and give 40 hours a week of hard labor to build somebody else's business, where when you die, you'll have nothing, but they're going to have a company they can pass to their kids. And and then you die with nothing. You gave everything, but you die with nothing. Then your children start with nothing. They start the process all over again. So that is inherited slavery. That is a generational curse that repeats itself over and over and over again. Here's a better goal. The real goal is so that's level zero, right? Level one is the George Jefferson goal. George Jefferson's my man, right? George Jefferson went out and hustled, right? He built his business. He's working his butt off. He's running his dry cleaners. He's making money. He's got a stockbroker. He's doing it, many things right, right? He's not a complete failure on any level, right? But George Jefferson still has to deal with the fact that Mr. Whittendale has a better life than him. But George has gone to level one. His children should be at level two. His children should be at the Mr. Whittendale level. What does that mean? Well, his children should be at the level where their dad, who busts his butt for his entire life, building a business and building assets and building wealth, then leaves him with enough assets where the children are not working because their money is working for them. So you are no longer the slave, you are the slave master. But you're not enslaving human beings, you're enslaving your dollar bills. Your slaves, your plantation workers are your dollar bills. You've got assets that you've deployed, and you're putting this money out there into different assets and different investments that are going to generate additional income for you. You put out $1 million, your $1 million comes back with friends, right? Do you know that that Warren Buffett, for example, who started off as a middle class kid, he didn't start off super, he didn't start off poor, but he didn't start off nearly as rich as he is right now. Warren Buffett probably makes about $10 million a day without working, just from the compound interest from his investments, just from the ROI generated from the businesses that he owns. That's how massive your compound interest can become when you are an investor. So Mr. Whittendale, by owning the building, he's got 1,000 tenants all paying his mortgage for him, right? He's probably also an owner in some stocks where he's got a piece of 100 different companies that are all out hustling to make money for him and bringing more money back. He's probably got some other assets. Maybe he's got some businesses that he owns a piece of, as an entrepreneur. Maybe he has private equity investments, right? But either way, the point of the matter is to say that level two is where you're at a point where your money is working so hard for you that you can't outwork your money anymore. Wealthy people that really get to the point where their money's working for them, there is no job they could get that would pay them enough money to make up for what their investments are earning them. Right? There is no job. They can't go like become an accountant or excuse me, an engineer making, 90,000 a year and feel like that's worth their time. Because at that point they're going to say, why would I go become an engineer and make $90,000 a year when I'm making $900,000 a year from the apartment building I own and the stocks that I own, right? Like there is, at that point you've really outworked the work. Like you've really outworked the work. Like you haven't just, like so George Jefferson is a guy who goes from having a job to owning his job, right? A Whittendale guy is a guy who goes from owning the job to literally being to the point where he's unhireable. You can't hire him. Wealthy people that I know, and remember Chris Rock used to talk about that, the difference between being rich and wealthy. He said Shaq is rich, but the man who writes Shaq's check, he's wealthy, right? Well, Shaq went from rich to wealthy. Shaq went from being a high-paid worker, right? He was playing for the Lakers or whatever and the different basketball teams, making millions of dollars. He was a high-paid worker. Now Shaq does not have to work at all. Shaq works because he wants to, because he wants something to do. Shaq, on any day of the week, could take an entire year off and just go sail around the world. Do you follow what I'm saying? Do you get what I'm saying? So when you learn the tools of wealth, it gives you the ability to kind of know what levels you want to go to, so that even if you don't get to that Whittendale level in your life, you can guarantee it's very easy under specific steps and instructions for you to get your children in that Mr. Whittendale role by the time they're 25, 30 years old. That is not hard to do. That is very straightforward, very direct. So, because remember, Mr. Whittendale didn't get to where he was from his hard work. He got there because of somebody else's work that was done before him, where the bed was laid before he was even born. Do you follow what I'm saying? Give me a yes or no if you get what I'm saying. Do me a favor. Please hit the thumbs up button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button. If you haven't done it yet, you can text the word Boyce to 31996. Text Boyce to 31996 if you'd like to get text notifications when we go live. And also, like I said, the Black Wealth Bootcamp starts on January 7th. Feel free to take a look. For 24 more hours, it's 72% off. We've never offered a discount that large. We won't offer another one for another year, but that's kind of a Black Friday thing. So feel free to take a look at that. And then also, if you want something that is that's free, feel free to go do our Black Stock Market Challenge. If you want to learn about stock market investing, the blackstockmarketchallenge.com. That's the URL. It's right there on the screen. Okay, guys. Well, I got to run. Thank you for listening. And one of the kids was knocking on the door, so let me go see what the kids want. I hope that this helps you. And thank you guys for letting me get it all out. This was on my mind, and I thought that I could share this with you, and it would help some of you in your wealth building journey. So love you guys. Have a good day. I'll see you soon. Peace.
Here we are, clan the isms,